I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. To prevent disruptive audio feedback incidents during our meeting, we kindly ask that all participants keep their earpieces away from any microphone. Audio feedback incidents can seriously injure interpreters and disrupt our proceedings. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. And also, just a quick reminder, an informal meeting with the Norwegian delegation at 5:30 today, for those interested. Pursuant to the order of reference on Monday, March 27th, 2023, the committee resumes its study of Bill C-26, an act respecting cybersecurity, amending the Telecommunications Act, and making consequential amendments to other acts. Today, the committee resumes clause-by-clause consideration, beginning with Clause 12. I will now welcome the officials who are with us. They are available for questions regarding the bill, but will not deliver any opening statements. Department of Industry, Andre Arbour, Director General, Strategy and Innovation Policy Sector. Department of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, Colin McSween, Director General, National Cybersecurity Directorate. William Hartley, Acting Manager. Communication Security Establishment, Stephen Bolton, Director General, Strategic Policy. Richard LaRose, Senior Technical Advisor. Thank you for joining us out today. So with that, we will begin.
Chair?
Yes, Mr. Shipley.
Thank you. I would just like to, first of all, welcome back, everyone. It's been a couple weeks and we left off. Hopefully everybody remembers, because I certainly don't exactly where we were. I just have a couple of housekeeping items, if I could ask for UC, just to open these back up, that we needed to get changed a little bit, that the legislative drafting informed there was a couple little mistakes. Okay.
Everyone, it's good?
Okay, thank you. I'll go through the first one. I think, did everybody get these? Yeah, so they have them. So the first one is for, we need to add, sorry, you don't have them, Simon? Simon does have them. You got them? Okay, we need to add under NDP 7, we need to reopen and add under section 15.21 B, there'll be now a subsection 1 under that, which will read, the number of times during the previous fiscal year that under subsection 15.2 bracket 6 an order prevailed over decision of the commission made under this act.
While you're getting the language, could I just ask, I said officials, if that changes in any way or if it really is just technical, if they deem it to change in any way the intention of what was passed prior while we're figuring out the specific language here?
Would someone like to respond to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. No, I don't see an operational problem with this text. It actually had been discussed in the last session, but might have gotten lost maybe in some of the line overlap there. It refers to a provision in the bill that is a for greater clarity provision that just says, in the event of an inconsistency between an order under this section and a decision of the CRTC, the security order prevails. This just adds an element to the reporting that says we need to include in a report should that happen. It's very unlikely that this will happen, but it's not a problem to report on it should it does.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And the first one, NDP.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to say I'm very impressed with the coordination of yourself and our witnesses with the suits today. I did not get the memo, so I wore a blue suit. I apologize for that. But I'm very impressed. I haven't seen that degree of coordination in a long time.
Or a good day. Are you guys okay with that? Consent NDP 7 is fine, which we're good to go. Mr. Shipley.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, and sorry for the delay. The next one, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, boy. Thank you again, and sorry, everyone. The next one is to correct also in NDP 7, paragraph 3. We've been informed we need to delete after act during previous fiscal year, delete the following, and must cause the report to be tabled before each House of Parliament on any of the first 15 days on which the House is sitting after the report is completed. Deleting that part.
That's good. Okay, it's considered good.
Well,
And
that
you
one
have
was a
one
lot
more?
easier, yes. And we need to reopen G 6.2. We need to add a subsection, add subsection 3 to G 6.2 that the report must also state the number of times that an order prevailed over decision of the Commission made under this Act during the previous fiscal year. That would be an addition. Paragraph 3.
I'm sorry, are you adding a paragraph 3?
Yes.
Move on. Is that good? Okay, thank you, Mr. Shipley. Now moving to Clause 12. Yes. Ms. O'Connell.
For government 6.4, so I don't know if I'm jumping ahead.
You are, but that's okay.
Okay, sorry.
We know you're hungry. Go ahead.
I am.
Yes.
I was getting ready to withdraw. I'm just,
Are you going to okay.
That's all.
Well, let's get started then. G 6.4, and you're withdrawing it? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we're moving to Clause 13, correct? G7. Any discussion? Shall G7 carry? Oh, Carol.
Okay. So,
Pushing it along, so we have to, if you can spare a couple seconds, we're going to go back to Clause 12, and as amended, or just carried? Just carried. Okay. Now we'll move to Clause 13.
yes.
G7. Any discussion? Yes, Mr. Julian, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to ask our terrifically coordinated witnesses what the impact would be of taking out private. I understand the need to capture Crown corporations in this. I'm wondering if there are any unintended consequences that may be of concern in terms of what that means for private companies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. No, it was exactly for that reason. The unintended consequence, unfortunately, with including the word private in there, is that some federally regulated Crown corporations may not be captured, and so we wanted to expand the language to ensure that they were included to capture the breadth of all federally regulated sectors.
Thank you, Mr. Julian. Ms. O'Connell.
I just move it, just catching up, but, and the explanation is exactly that, just removing the word private.
Carried. G8. Ms. O'Connell.
Same, Mr. Chair, I'll move that. And again, it's the same as G7. The rationale is to remove the word private from federally regulated private sector just to expand and ensure everything is captured.
Shall G8 carry? Carried. G9. Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'll move this, and it's just to correct a drafting error to ensure that publicly owned and operated organizations can also be captured, similar to G7 and 8.
Shall G9 carry? Yes. Thank you. G9.1. Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you. We're moving so fast, I just have to catch up with my notes, but I'll move this again, and it's essentially to ensure that the federal government can enter into agreements with provincial and territorial governments. So it's to include as one of the provisions with provinces and territories. That's the language it's adding.
Thank you. Shall G9.1 carry? Yes. G10. Ms. O'Connell. I'll slow down.
Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you.
I'll share.
Yes.
I'll move this one. And maybe the officials could just explain to us how this preserves the due diligence defense, which is the intent of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So the amendments will reinforce the policy intent of these sections, which was to create a strict liability offense for contravening the Act and ensure the applicability of a due diligence defense. Strict liability is where the defendant is liable for the offenses regardless of their intent. For example, in drug possession cases, it is assumed someone found in possession of drugs has committed this offense and they are responsible to prove their innocence. In the case of the CCSPA, for example, you could say a designated operator failed to establish a cybersecurity program within the 90 days designated under the Act. This is a punishable offense. So as currently written, the Crown must demonstrate that the designated operator did not meet this requirement. Instead, and what was originally intended, is that the amendment would assume the offense occurred and the designated operator would then have the opportunity to prove otherwise in a judicial review process by showing they tried to comply. This is otherwise known as the due diligence defense.
Thank you. I think that's what we need in this, in the amendments needed to make sure that due diligence defense is in the legislation.
Thank you. Shall G10 carry? Carry. BQ12.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc, BQ 12 vise à...
Thank you. BQ 12 seeks to avoid doing the same thing twice. There are already organizations that have a cybersecurity program, and this addition in the legislation seeks that they would be exempted from some of the requirements in terms of cybersecurity. According to Electricity Canada, it wouldn't improve infrastructure that's already in place. They were talking about standards that had already been put in place, that are already applied. And so that's the purpose of that amendment.
Ms. O'Connell.
Chair. Through you to any of the officials who could answer on this, would this effectively mean that then a designated operator could determine themselves if they meet the threshold and therefore wouldn't be subject? I understand the intention. I just want to make sure that there isn't kind of a self-regulating saying, oh, we have these cyber security policies and therefore, no need to look here sort of thing. That's how I am reading it, but perhaps you could elaborate if this is of concern.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. We absolutely appreciate the intent behind this provision. However, I think an unintended consequence could be that it would effectively allow designated operators to determine themselves whether their existing cybersecurity programs meet the requirements of the CCSPA and whether they are therefore obligated to comply with the obligations regarding the cybersecurity programs. Unfortunately, this would undermine the purpose of the CCSPA, which is to ensure that all designated operators meet a base level of cybersecurity.
Julian, please.
Mais moi, je sais très bien que l'intention...
I understand that the intention of this amendment is a good one, but the designated operators could classify themselves, and so I'm afraid I can't support this amendment.
Okay. Anybody else? Any further discussion? We'll vote on this amendment? Yeah? All right. All those in favor? All those against? Defeated. Okay. You guys good? G11. Ms. O'Connell, please.
Thank you. This amendment, again, is dealing with the prescribed time frame for notification of changes. we had lots of discussion around this, and I think the proposed language, which would be within a period prescribed by the regulations instead of without delay, will provide more clarity, and not every industry will require the same timeframes. Some might be more complicated than others, and through regulations, I think industry would probably welcome the ability to have those conversations, and so we just think this language achieves the same things but provides a little bit more certainty to the private sector or those who might have to comply under this.
Thank you. Discussion? No? Shall G11 carry? G12. Ms. O'Connell.
Sure, thanks. Again, this removes the reference to reasonable steps in section 15. And this would then allow for that availability of a due diligence defense, and just, again, provides more clarity to what we believe the intention of this bill is, but based on feedback, just want to put in some language that would ease some of those concerns.
Thank you. No discussion. Shall G12 carry? BQ13. Ms. Michaud, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. BQ13 is quite simple. There are a number of stakeholders that asked us to better protect information, data, and so this amendment seeks to increase confidence in information sharing. It really just seeks to strengthen the use of information that's collected.
So if BQ13 is moved, CPC 19 cannot be moved as they are identical, which I should have read out before you did your comments, but my apologies. So, shall BQ carry? BQ13 carry? Yep, certainly. Mr.
I just was wondering if the officials had any comment on BQ 13 and its potential of limiting CSE's information, using information only for cybersecurity purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. And I think first off, it is important to note that CSE would not receive any new authorities under the Act. It would leverage our existing mandate under the CSE Act, so Section 16 of the Act, for cybersecurity and information assurance, to provide technical advice, guidance, and services, both to designated operators and Government of Canada partners. So information collected by CSE pursuant to one aspect of our mandate can be used by CSE under another aspect of the mandate, as long as it meets specific conditions set out in the CSE Act. Information related to security programs will enable CSE and its Cyber Centre to gain a better understanding of the supply chain risk of designated operators, as well as the intentions of a foreign entity via its penetration into respective sectors. Without being able to leverage CSE's mandate as a whole, CSE's understanding of foreign actors' intentions against our critical infrastructure and the proper strategic mitigations would be greatly diminished. Any limitation would also reduce CSE's collaboration with our Five Eyes partners. So I would suggest that this amendment may not be necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Motz. Yes,
Mr. Chair, on a point of order.
just one moment, Mr. McKinnon, please. Oh, sorry, he can, okay. Go ahead, Mr. McKinnon.
Yeah, I not in the room. I can't really tell how the vote's going, so I don't really know if G12 carried or not. I wonder if you could be sure to announce the results each time. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKinnon. Ms. O'Connell, please.
Thank you. Just on this amendment, well, again, I understand the rationale. I just think for members' benefit, we also agree in the sense that any collection of data should not be used for surveillance purposes. So I just want to point members to our changes in G9.1 and eventually 14.2, which will reiterate that. So we won't be supporting this amendment, but we do agree and want to put the point home that this legislation is not, as the officials have pointed out, is not to create a new like surveillance mandate. So that's why we won't be supporting it, but I think it's important we point to those other amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Shall BQ 13 carry? No. Vote? Show of hands, please. All those in favor? Okay. All those against? Defeated. We're now moving on to NDP 10. If NDP 10 is moved, BQ 14 and CPC 20 cannot be moved as they are identical. Also, if NDP 10 is adopted, G13 cannot be moved due to a line conflict. Mr. Julian.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is regarding the issue of C26 currently asking designated operators to immediately report a cybersecurity incident. The reality is, as we've heard from testimony, Canadian Chamber of Commerce notably, and other witnesses talked about a 72-hour reporting period. So immediate being defined as 72 hours. And it's important to note that in the U.S., the Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act also talks about a 72-hour reporting time frame. Our witnesses said very clearly that immediately made it potentially difficult for them to resolve the issue, to respond to the cyber attack, because they would be concerned about the impacts of not reporting in that immediate time frame. A 72-hour window is something that provides for the ability to combat the cybersecurity incident and do the reporting in a very timely way. So I'd like to move what we heard from witnesses and move NDP 10 to essentially provide an amendment that the designated operator must report the cybersecurity incident within 72 hours from the time the operator reasonably believes the incident occurred.
Thank you, Mr. Julian. Any further discussions? Ms. O'Connell, please. French fries.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm making everyone jealous. I think all parties have submitted something in terms of dealing with the time frame. So I think we all are in agreement on the intent and removing immediately from as not being clear enough. But I think we still prefer G13, which again creates a period prescribed by regulations that could also address, again, industry differences. But I'm open to hearing the conversation because obviously we're not on G13 yet. But perhaps through the chair to officials, what happens if 72 hours is adopted, and in some industries, for example, banking might be one where they could comply quite easily, but telecom, by the time they track down what the issue might be, is that going to be a problem, or is this too prescriptive, not prescriptive enough? I guess I just want to get a sense of what we think will be achieved with this. Also, given that all parties are concerned about the initial drafting of the language, and how do we come to a better consensus of what it should be replaced with?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So on the timeline for the mandatory reporting, probably one of the benefits of moving it into regulations, as you mentioned, is that it does allow for more flexibility, not just in consideration of the different sectors and their abilities, but also in terms of changes down the road. If we codify it in legislation, obviously we would have to go through the legislative process to amend that at any point. Whereas if there was a need to change it in 3, 5, 10 years' time, doing that in regulations is a more straightforward process, I suppose.
With that being said, and I agree, if things change and things should happen faster or need more time, I like the idea of being able to do it through regulations instead of opening up the legislation altogether. So I won't support this amendment, but look forward to hopefully G13 unless there is something kind of discussed here. I don't know where my other colleagues stand on the differences.
Thank you. I'm not generally a fan of hiding everything in regulations, but it makes total sense to have some flexibility with respect to the different aspects that we're dealing with here. It's not just one stream. We're dealing with a lot of different players. And so I think it makes sense in this case to put it in regs. So I won't be supporting this one, but I will be supporting G13.
Well, I'm going to push back against the coalition a bit, just in the sense that, first off, we do have within the idea of a 72-hour reporting period harmonization with existing regimes, such as in the United States. So the reporting mechanism is already in place in the United States and well understood. It is also, I think, incumbent on us to listen to the witnesses who came forward that talked about the 72-hour reporting period. As my friend Mr. Motz pointed out, it's less transparent when it's in regulation. And the reality is governments of the day are able to tweak legislation if 10 years down the road it is something that requires some tweaking. There are a variety of ways of doing that. So I guess I would suggest that the 72-hour reporting mechanism is reasonable, an improvement on what it currently exists in the bill. It is in keeping with our major trading partner, who has in place exactly that same legislation, and it responds to what we repeatedly heard from witnesses, which was that a 72-hour reporting period was reasonable and something that they believed would allow the bill to be effective and also allow entities to respond to the urgency of a cyber attack and respond in a timely way. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it over to the committee to decide.
Thank you. Ms. O'Connell, please.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Just a couple points. First, there's nothing to prescribe, even if we don't pass this amendment and go with G13. There's nothing to say that maybe a 72-hour reporting time wouldn't be the thing determined based on a particular sector. So I hear Mr. Julian's point about consistency with our allies. I don't disagree, but I think that can be determined through consultations and regulations as well. But with that being said, I'm just also, I forgot to ask earlier, but through the chair to our officials, in terms of the other line that I kind of have some concerns with this amendment is not just the 72 hours, but from the time the operator reasonably believes the incident occurred. I would have some concerns about relying on when the operator is determining the start of that clock. I don't know if I'm alone in that. Could we perhaps get some commentary on that line in the amendment as well?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Yes, I think that's a valid point. When we reviewed the draft wording, that was one of the unintended consequences that was raised. It could leave crucial aspects of Canada's cybersecurity, the timeliness of cyber incident reporting, up to the discretion of the operators themselves. And even if in a scenario, I guess based on the previous amendments, even if in a scenario where this wasn't the case, if there was some concern by the operators, the due diligence offense would still apply. So anyway, sorry, long story short, I think your concern is quite valid.
Good. Thank you. Mr. Motz, please. You're good? Mr. Shipley.
Just quickly to speed things up a little bit, we will not be supporting NDP 10, but we'll be supporting G13.
With amendment.
With an amendment from Mr. Motz.
Shipley, any further discussion on NDP 10? I'll ask for a vote, a show of hands. Those in favor? Those against? Defeated. G13 can only be moved if NDP 10 was defeated. Also, if G13 is adopted, is defeated. Do you want this? Ms. O'Connell?
I'll move it but for the sake of time, I think we've had the conversations and my comments earlier about the changes needed, but I think we should get into the different reporting timeframes through regulations.
Please.
I would agree, and if the parties are amicable to it, a sub-amendment that would put in the regulations, talk about within because the witnesses talked about a 72-hour time period, and we can put that in the regs in some way, shape, or form to ensure that timeline has been honored, but it's in the regs. No, I'm not contradictory. I'm saying that we need to do it some way, but having some flexibility is the way we got to do it, not in the act itself.
Please.
I agree with Mr. Motz. I believe he's moving a motion of reconsideration on NDP 10. Well, the 72 hours, in terms of regulation, I believe we could provide some guidance on the regs, but it would be safer and clearer if we just had the 72 hours written into the legislation.
Ms. Dem, off, please.
Go ahead, Jen. Sorry, I'm going to defer.
Ms. O'Connell?
Thanks. Throwing it out there, we can have some discussion actually, and I would like to include it with officials, but if we included something along the lines of not to exceed 72 hours, would that be, again, the intention in terms of speed, but in a way that could allow, through regulations, the industry-specific or sector-specific? Could I maybe ask before I move that language? But before I move that language, could I just make sure that that would actually be achievable through the chair to maybe Mr. McSween or?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Yes, that at work we could put that in regulations. For the committee's consideration, so I think part of the rationale for recommending it be moved to regulations was to allow for flexibility, not just in changing it, but actually between recognizing the differences in sectors as well too. So when we did our consultations, we heard very clearly from the energy sector, for example, that they were very interested in a 72-hour time frame because obviously of the cross-border linkages of the international pipelines, so for example with the U.S. And so that certainly made a lot of sense there. We would like to take the opportunity through the regulatory process to do sort of in-depth consultations with the other impacted parties in order to determine that that reporting requirement will work for them in a way that is best placed for their sector. Just with that in mind, then another possible consideration could be in consideration of the reporting timelines of major partners or something to that effect.
And I agree and support. It's the whole rationale of supporting the idea around having some of that flexibility while not losing the intention of speed is a necessity. So in the event, if we added or if the Conservatives move a sub-amendment to include not to exceed, and let's say there was a sector that had issues, could you come back within the regs on dealing with that, or is that kind of the floor or ceiling, I guess, depending who you are in terms of looking at that time frame?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I believe it was codified in such a way as to say, I forget the exact wording, but within 72 hours, I feel like we'd be bound to that. However, that could make sense in the circumstance. And as I understand it, I believe the proposal is for that to be captured in regulations, so that could also be amended through the regulatory process as well, too.
Mr. Motz, please.
So would it work if we inserted some language to not exceed, but make it sector specific, and also in his in circumstances to not exceed or within 72 hours. But again, give flexibility within the wording. And I don't know how to think of that right now, but flexibility in the wording that will allow for energy-specific time adjustments, but within 72 hours if possible. Is that something that's workable?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Yes, I believe that would be workable.
Good? Everybody good? So that was my next.
So within 72, so at the end of this, within a period prescribed by regulations, within 72 hours,
Could we maybe park this one, work on a little bit of language and come back? I just don't want to do it on the fly. I think our intentions are good, and then it allows us just to kind of work on the proper language without having to do it like this.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Because Clause 13 may have effect on other parts of this, so we're going to suspend for about 2 or 3 minutes here and just get some language around this. Suspend. I will ask Mr. Motts to read out his amendment to G13 for the record.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at paragraph 17 there, a designated operator must, within a period prescribed by the regulations, not to exceed 72 hours. We've taken out the energy, the specific sector because the regulations require a consultation with sector-specific operators anyway. So not to exceed 72 hours.
Any further discussion on this? Good. Mr. Julian.
Just if so not to exceed, a designated officer, operator must, within a period not to exceed 72 hours, right? Yeah, I support this.
Thank you, Mr. Julian.
amendment.
Mr. McKinnon, your hand's up.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering if there are any industries that require a longer period, or whether that's really acceptable as a maximum.
Yes, Mr. McSwain, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So during our consultations, that was probably one of the points that was raised the most was harmonization with the requirement of CISA in the U.S., which is the 72-hour requirement. I don't recall any other input specifically that suggested anything longer would be needed.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. O'Connell, please.
Chair, thank you. Just to clarify, I think the issue is not the 72 hours for us per se, because we do want to ensure that we can have consistency with the U.S. The issue in the previous motion was really around when that clock started ticking, being at the kind of the operator's discretion. So we're very happy to support the 72-hour amendment.
Okay. No further discussion. So we vote on the sub-amendment. All those in favor? All those against? None. Okay, and now we'll go back to the original motion. Yes, oh, sorry. Mr. Brock?
Thank you. I'd like to move a motion at this time, Mr. Chair. It has been distributed to the clerk in both official languages.
We need to finish G13, Mr. Brock, before you can move that motion.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, back to the,
Point of order, did the sub-amendment pass? I didn't hear that.
yes, carried.
Thank you.
Back to G13, original motion. Any further discussion on it? Shall G13 carried as amended? Carried. Okay, Mr. Brock, please.
Chair, the motion in both official languages reads as follows, that given that under the current NDP Liberal government, car thefts across Canada have surged by 34%, and that the Insurance Bureau of Canada, IBC, has deemed the number of car thefts a national crisis, stating that insurers have had to pay out record numbers, and these costs are passed directly on to Canadians, costing every driver an extra $130 per year. And recently reported in the media, a Montrealer went through hell in March when his car was stolen twice in just 3 weeks. The committee reports to the House that Canada is facing a national auto theft crisis and requests that the Minister of Public Safety appear before the committee for no less than 3 hours in relation to the ongoing auto theft study.
Thank you. Ms. O'Connell, please.
Mr. Chair, I move we adjourn debate on this motion.
All in favor? All in favor? All in favor? Mr. Clerk.
Ms. O'Connell? Yes. Mr. McKinnon?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes?
Ms. Dama?
Yes.
Mr. Chen?
Yes.
Mr. Shipley?
No.
Mr. Lloyd?
No.
Mr. Motts?
No.
Mr. Brock?
No.
Madame Michaud?
En faveur.
Monsieur Julian?
No.
Just defeated.
So adopted. Adopted.
6-5.
6-5.
6-5 is defeated.
Adopted.
Or, I'm favor. Sorry. All right. Can we move on? Okay, he took his hand down. Yeah. CPC 21, right?
Yes.
You ready, Doug? CPC 21?
And CPC 20 are toast, right?
Right.
I'd like to move CPC 21, please. Now I've lost two. We did go quick and then slow.
It's all right.
This amendment will require a designated operator to notify the regulator of a cyber incident within 24 hours instead of immediately.
Any discussion? Mr. Julian? Did you have your hand up? Okay.
A little confused by the conservative amendment. Perhaps Mr. Shipley could explain a little bit more the discrepancy between the 72 hours we were speaking of earlier and the 24 hours targeted by their amendment.
Chair?
Mr. Julian, back to Mr. Shipley, please.
After Mr. Motz's amendment last one, we're going to ask for UC to withdraw that CPC 21. Sorry about that, everyone.
Unanimous consent? We good? Withdrawn. NDP 11.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will flag that I'm going to be trying if as we go along, there's a number of NDP amendments. I'm going to be withdrawing a number of them just in the interest of moving forward. But in this particular case, it would be deleting on request for a designated operator to report to the appropriate regulator. It shouldn't be on request, it should be mandatory, and that's why I am proposing this amendment.
Any discussion on NDP 11? No? Shall NDP 11 carry? Yes. Carried. CPC 21.1.
Thank you, Chair. This one we will be moving, CPC 21.1. That is, this would require operators to report ransomware payments to the CSE. There is currently no requirement to report payments to the CSE in the legislation. The CSE has often remarked that ransomware payments go underreported. This will align with the United States version of this bill.
Any further discussion? Ms. O'Connell, please.
Thank you. I would just actually like to ask through you two officials the impacts of this language and if it's not already covered. Because if my rationale in thinking is that if a sector is already required to report whether or not they pay ransomware or not, the request would trigger the reporting or the breach would trigger the reporting in my understanding of it, but I'd like to know if I'm wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. The Act indeed does seek to prevent any and all types of cyber security incidents, including but not limited to ransomware. The legislation as written would already capture ransomware incidents because ransomware is simply a form of malicious code that is used for a particular purpose, often extortion. So the Act would already give the government the ability to collect technical information to prevent, respond to, and recover from ransomware incidents. If we stop the malicious code from getting into our systems in the first place, then malicious actors won't have the opportunity to ransom us. Thank you.
So with that being said, Mr. Chair, I think, again, the intentions make a lot of sense, but if it's already covered within the rest of the Act, what I think this then poses to do is create, again, a 24-hour rule within a specific type of attack, which is ransomware, versus what we just discussed of having an overall regulation around timing of reporting for all activities. And I think if we start breaking breaking up these, cyber incidents and creating different standards for reporting, I think it will become confusing, and then that confusion could even cause to a lack of a sector knowing when to report what. So I think for clarity's sake, I feel comfortable that a ransomware attack would be covered on the reporting side of the rest of this legislation, and we don't need to isolate out and create a specific new reporting timeframe just for ransomware. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Shipley, anything further? Good. We shall vote. A show of hands in favor? Against? Defeated? BQ 15.
Et je vais retirer cet amendement.
I'm going to withdraw the amendment, Mr. Chair. We had already talked about this issue in the first part of the study. It has to do with proportionality and reasonableness, so I'm going to withdraw.
Thank you. You withdraw? Unanimous consent? Not moved at all. Okay, good. G14. If G14 is adopted, CPC 22 cannot be moved due to a line conflict. Any discussion? Did you have your hand up, Jen? No? Okay, good.
Someone else was jumping in? No?
Ms. O'Connell, please.
Thank you. Again, this is just creating a little bit more clarity and to keep in line with the intent of the legislation. And we heard concerns for sure about creating guardrails and transparency. So this just provides that additional language to make sure that it's reasonable grounds for an order, and then list some of the factors that might be considered. So again, it's just in relation to providing that clarity in the legislation that we always believed was the intent of the law, to give some reassurance to those who raise some concerns.
No further discussion. Shall G14 carry? CPC 22. Oh, sorry, hang on. 14. 1, 2. Yes,
you.
Go ahead, Ms. O'Connell.
Thanks. This is, I think we spoke about this in the first half of the bill, but it creates the obligation to notify NSICOP and NSIRA within 90 days of issuing of a cybersecurity directive. So just to refresh everyone's memory, what was of some concern was how would anyone know if a secret order is made while still maintaining national security protections? And also, I'm sure for certain sectors to provide, they don't want competitors to know necessarily of any gaps. So we felt this was a reasonable opportunity to provide NSICOP and NSIRA notice, and that they are the masters of what they study, but it would allow that preemptive kind of acknowledgement if an order is actually issued, to ensure that somebody knows to look for it and can look into it deeper with the protections of NSICOP and NSIRA that they have in dealing with sensitive information.
Shall G14.1 carry? G14.2. Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you. This, again, goes to, I think, the earlier point I made about this is not to expand surveillance purposes, and so it's to provide greater clarity around this language that the governor and council is not permitted to order any designated operator or class of operators to intercept a private communication. So again, and it goes on to list these things. So again, it's just making clear the intention of the bill is to collect data and not to create or expand any sort of surveillance powers.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. No further discussion. Shall G 14.2 carry? Yes. Carried. NDP 12. If NDP 12 is moved, CPC 23 cannot be moved as they are identical. Also, if NDP 12 is adopted, BQ 16 cannot be moved due to a line conflict.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We had this debate at a previous meeting. I'm going to raise it for the final time today. And if the committee decides that the argument holds merit, then we will continue the discussions. If not, I will withdraw the amendments. But this is a recommendation that comes from the coalition. We've had a variety of recommendations around this to not exempt this legislation from the Standing Joint Committee for the Scrutiny of Regulations. So currently, it says very clearly that an order made here is exempt from the application of the Statutory Instruments Act. This amendment would delete those lines 26 to 28 on page 26, so it would no longer exempt the applications of the sections of the Act from the Statutory Instruments Act and thus allow the ability for these regulations to be accessible to the Standing Joint Committee for the Scrutiny of Regulations. I've raised this before. Certainly, testimony we heard from witnesses was very compelling on this. At previous discussions of similar amendments, the committee has not chosen to move forward with those amendments, and I am giving a last opportunity for members of the committee to support subjecting clauses of this bill to the Standing Joint Committee for the Scrutiny of Regulations and the Statutory Instruments Act. If the committee chooses to go in a different direction, I may disagree, but I will then ask for withdrawal of NDP amendments 13 to 24, which treat the same subject, as you know, Mr. Chair. So I'm hoping the committee will move to adopt this, but that is not how the committee has decided on similar amendments like this that I've presented in the past.
Thank you, Mr. Julian. Ms. O'Connell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, understanding the need for that transparency and oversight, but this is precisely why in our amendments that we just dealt with were to identify and notify NCIRA and NSICOP of any orders made. The challenge with this amendment, again, keeping in mind I do understand the intent, is that it would create a delay that would essentially make the legislation obsolete. But to ensure that I am understanding that correctly, maybe through the chair to Mr. McSween probably, am I correct in that assumption that by excluding the exemption would create a delay in terms of going forward and being able to make not a regulation, but an order to bring in compliance or to, let's say, I guess, speed up the issue if we don't have someone in the sector who is taking the matter urgently at hand.
Mr. McSween, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Yes, that is a concern. It's similar to the concerns raised during when the committee considered Part 1 of the Act as well, too. It does create a time lag as to when the decisions can be made. I think as well, too, just another unintended consequence potentially with this specific amendment is that requiring publishing in the Canada Gazette could potentially make or would make confidential information or identifiable information of our critical infrastructure public.
Okay. Thank you. Any further discussion? No. So do we want to vote on this? Or have you... Okay. All those in favor? Show of hands. All those against? Defeated.
So Mr. Chair, I'll withdraw NDP 13 to NDP 24.
Thank you, Mr. Julian. Get that? So we're right here.
So BQ 16.
Okay. We good? BQ 16 can only be moved if NDP 12 or CPC 23 were defeated. So we're good.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, mais je vais retirer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but I'm going to be withdrawing BQ 16. Would you like me to repeat that? I'm going to be withdrawing BQ 16.
15.
Yes, G15, yes.
We will move now to G15. Ms. O'Connell?
Thank you, Chair. This was just to, again, clarify that confidential information that is collected, that it's disclosed under the section, and that it must always be treated as confidential, so that confidentiality travels with the information and not just with whomever initially received it. It's just to clarify that that was always the intention and to make it perfectly clear.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. Any further discussion? Ms. Michaud, please.
Je vais juste confirmer avec vous.
I just want to confirm, if that amendment passes, I suppose that BQ 17 and 18 can't be introduced, or can I still introduce them? Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? G15. Shall G15 carry? Yes. Carried? I thought someone said no. All right. Okay. So we're back to 17. BQ 17. If BQ 17 is moved, CPC 24 cannot be moved as they are identical.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For BQ 17, it's quite simple. This was a proposal by organizations that seek to protect human rights, civil rights. Information that's collected should only be kept for the duration of time that's provided in Section 20. It's really just that in BQ 17.
Any discussion? Yes, Ms. O'Connell.
Sorry, I just have a question through you two officials. As I read this amendment, it's simply dealing with the retention of that information. Are there concerns or issues in terms of limiting this to this amendment, which really just, again, defines about how long the information is kept for, and that is provided clarity to whomever, I guess, the sector that it's coming from. Do we have concerns, and what would be the problem with something like this and clarifying the retention of information?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Two considerations for the committee just as it relates to this amendment. So when the Act was constructed, it was built in such a way as to contemplate just the collection of technical information related to commercial interests and whatnot. And so the intention behind that was that it would work with related pieces of legislation, for example, those governing the agencies associated with it, which may in some cases have requirements around the retention and disposition of information already. The other consideration I would point out as well too, the amendment reads for as long as is necessary. Typically in statute we would see a time frame attached to the retention period. So I would offer those two considerations up for the committee's result.
Thanks. So if I'm reading, or if I understand that correctly, you don't have an issue with the retention period, but it's that it's as long as necessary keeps it more broad?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Yes, in a way, it could be read to be overly broad. That's absolutely a consideration.
Go ahead.
I'm just kind of curious from the officials what a reasonable retention period would be based on this clause.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. It's a difficult question to answer because, as I said, when we initially set up the legislation, we intended it to work with the existing pieces that were out there. For example, the CSE's enabling legislation, the enabling legislation of public safety, and the retention periods that apply to those, whether that's from Library and Archives Canada or Privacy Act, et cetera, et cetera. So it's hard to give you a specific number because they vary across statutes.
So for the purposes of this particular clause, if we need to ensure that there's not information floating out there needlessly, but if we also, if it's too broad to have for as long as necessary, how do you define it that there's comfortability by all, by officials, by the private operators, by those whose information is contained that we want to protect? What's a reasonable I can't think of reasonable language other than, there is a set date. Right? Generally, there's a set number of days or months or years that you can retain information. Then it's got to be destroyed. Mr. LaRose?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In this case, if the data isn't very useful, then there's a 1-year limit. We'll be working with the operator that's had an incident. If a product is created by CSE, then we have to keep the information for as long as that product is useful and needed. If the product is needed, then we keep the information. If the incident is over, then we can stop collecting and we erase the data.
Ms. O'Connell, no more? Okay. Any other further discussion? I believe we'll vote on this amendment. All those in favor? It's BQ 17, just so we're all clear, right? Okay. We're voting on this amendment. All those in favor? All those against? Favorite one. Carried. BQ 18. If BQ 18 is moved, CPC 25 cannot be moved as they are identical. Any discussion?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. BQ 18 is quite simple. A person or entity that collects or receives information under subsection 1 must not use it for any purpose other than set out in section 5. It was one of the recommendations by the organizations that came to appear before us.
Any discussion? No? Shall BQ 18 carry? Oh, sorry.
Catching up.
Ms. O'Connell, please.
Thank you. I just have concerns about the exchange of information. I just feel like this is a little bit redundant since we, in our earlier amendment, dealt with the issues around confidentiality and that sticking that any of that information must not, this amendment says must not be, use it for any purpose other than what's set out in section 5. And I think it's a little bit redundant in the sense that we've already clarified confidentiality continues. We've also clarified that the collection of data is specifically for its use. It's not expanding powers. So again, intention is fine. I just think we've already addressed it in other amendments.
Any further comments? Shall we vote on this? Sure. Okay. Shall BQ carry? Or
BQ 18.
all in favor of BQ 18? All against? Defeated. CPC 24. Oh, C26, CPC 26.
Thank you, Chair. I would actually like to ask for UC to try and speed things up a little bit today, and we'll be able to get through this. We would like to withdraw from CPC 26 all CPC amendments right through to CPC 50 with UC from the committee. We don't need UC. We'll just do it then. We do. We'll withdraw all of them. No, we're withdrawing them. We're withdrawing those.
CP2, so we'll go right to 19. BQ 19. Ms. Michaud, please.
I'm going to withdraw BQ 19 and 20, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. BQ 21, Ms. Michaud, please. We don't need to read this.
C'est simplement pour ajouter.
So just to add the definitions of de-identify and personal information in the Act. I don't know what my colleagues around the table think of this.
Could you repeat that for us, please?
Could you please?
BQ 21 vise simplement à.
So BQ 21, we're adding the definitions to de-identify and personal information. There are a number of definitions that are already in the Act, but it seemed relevant to me to add definitions for these two terms as well.
Any further discussions? Ms. O'Connell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Mr. McSween, what would this amendment then, what would be the implications of this? Because my concern would be that it removes the ability of disclosure. Am I reading that incorrectly? From an operator, that an order was actually issued. Sorry, I'm reading and thinking and speaking at the same time, but that my understanding that this would a little bit be contrary to, I think, what the intentions of the Act is.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell.
Wait, sorry, I had a question. To Mr. McSween.
Yep, Mr. McSween.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. The disclosure and use provisions of the CCSPA only include protections for confidential information right now, and partially that's because, again, the Act was constructed in such a way that it only contemplated the collection of technical and information related to commercial interests and that type of thing. Similar to sort of what I explained earlier, the way the law is set up is that because it only intends to collect that type of information, it deferred responsibility for, say, personal information to existing statutes. So, for example, Charter and the Privacy Act and the requirements therein. But then as well, too, for any of the statutory requirements that may be found in the acts of the agencies that are involved in the administration of the Act. And there are many safeguards built in there as well, too. One of the challenges here is that it introduces two new concepts to Part 2, which is the de-identified information and the personal information that the government would need to consider when disclosing this. Taken together, the consequences of accepting this motion could be that information regarding the protection of critical cyber systems is not shared because it does apparently raise the statutory requirement to share with that information.
What does that mean in the real world? You know, can you give me an example of what, if information that could be shared isn't shared, how that looks, if that's what I'm understanding? Or you're saying that this limits even the information that can share?
It could potentially limit the information that could be shared. It is a bit difficult to say because it does introduce, I said, these two new concepts. There's sort of two concerns. One is that depending on who's doing the disclosing, they would now need to consider these requirements above and beyond whatever safeguards are already in place. And then I think the other key component is Just simply that it does raise the overall, or seemingly raise the overall threshold beyond, say, what is in the Privacy Act currently.
Okay. I think my concerns here too is, well, one, it's confusing in the sense of what is being added or kind of the above and beyond disclosure. But I think, why would we want to limit disclosure if there's an ability to disclose something, notwithstanding some of the challenges, but why would we limit that even further? So that's why I have issues with that, unless colleagues can compel or make a stronger argument. But that I don't see why we would want to limit where we can disclose any of that information.
No further discussion. Call for a vote and a show of hands. In favor? Against? Defeated. G16. Ms. O'Connell, please.
Sorry, 1 second. Okay. This would just, again, is to provide greater clarity that confidential information would only be disclosed under authorized circumstances, and with those there's already a defined need to access the information. So again, the confidential information carries along with those who it's passed on to, but only in circumstances where they are authorized to have it.
Discussion, shall G16 carry? Carried. BQ 22.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what we seek to add is that in 1.1, if an exchange of information occurs under an agreement or arrangement with the government of a foreign state or with an international organization established by the governments of foreign states, the minister must, without delay, notify the person to whom the information relates of the disclosure and of the state or organization that received it. We just want the providers be informed when the organization that receives the information
Vote. Show of hands. In favor? Against? Defeated. 23. BQ 23, please. Ms.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In Clause 13, line 6, that the agreement or arrangement must restrict the retention of the information to the period necessary for the purposes set out in subsection 1 and provide for its subsequent disposal. So that the information that the providers have are only kept for the duration that's required.
Call for a vote. Show of hands. In favor? Thank you. And against? Defeated. 23, where are we at? 17? 17. G17, please.
So you withdrew? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Sorry. Again, this is providing more clarity that confidential information is only to be disclosed under authorized circumstances and shared with those who have that defined access to information. This again just goes to address some concerns and provide that clarifying language that the information is only to be used within where it's required and with whom it's required, and that it will always maintain that confidentiality component with it.
Thank you. Let's see if anybody opposed. Shall G17 carry? Yes. Carried. NDP 13. that right?
Mr. Chair, I mean the royal we, withdrew 13 to 24. And my colleagues from the Conservative Party withdrawn up to CPC 50. So we would be, I believe, moving to NDP 25.
NDP 15. I can't keep up either. Julian.
Which would mean, according to my records, Mr. Chair, that we're just about to hit the final page of the amendments. And so I would like to speak just once on the series of amendments and again test the feeling of the committee. NDP 25 moving up to NDP 36 seeks to amend the legislation to give clear direction to the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, the Ministry of Industry, the Bank of Canada, Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, Canadian Energy Regulator, and the Ministry of Transport. Requires them to file a notice of a violation and requires them to make that those amendments public. So what this does is twofold in terms of violations of the Act. It pushes those regulators to issue a notice of violation and make it public. It may not have the support of the committee. I do believe it's important in terms of transparency and in terms of ensuring that we are doing everything in our power to push back against the cyber attacks that have threatened some of our key institutions. So in an unusual way, because we're now at the back end of consideration of amendments, I'd like to propose NDP 25, and depending on the committee's reaction, NDP 25. If NDP 25 is supported, I'll continue to move the other amendments for the institutions that I've just spoken of. And if NDP 25 is rejected, I would withdraw NDP 26 to 36.
No. We're at NDP 25. Any further discussion on NDP 25? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, raise their hand. All those against? Defeated.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Certainly, Mr. Julian.
That is a very clear result. I'm not going to ask for a recount, but I will withdraw NDP 26 to 36.
I'll give everybody a second to catch up.
Yes.
Yep.
Page 1.
You okay? Everybody okay? G18. Ms. O'Connell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Simple again, just putting a comma, removing the word and then manner and period should be a very technical language change.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. No further discussion. Shall G18 carry? Yes. BQ 24.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. BQ 24. This was a concern that we heard from Crown corporations, from Hydro-Quebec, that certain parts of the bill could encroach on the areas of jurisdiction of the provinces and of Quebec. And so there are a few lines that are added here. For greater certainty, the power provided by subsection 1 must be exercised in accordance with the jurisdiction and powers of the provinces and territories.
With this one, that this amendment would ultimately reduce or diminish the ability for the federal government to determine the level of cybersecurity required. I think from a good cyber practice, working with provinces and territories in these areas makes a lot of sense. But I would worry in some provinces and territories who may not have the cyber capabilities that the federal government would have, or some provinces may have excellent capabilities and others may require more time, expertise, technical support. So I just worry about the current language kind of requiring the federal government to first work in accordance with provinces and territories, and not all might be at the same kind of level in terms of what that cyber capability might be. And obviously some of our agencies like CSE or CSIS and higher levels of the RCMP are specifically federal, and so it's of no fault to provinces and territories, just wouldn't have access to all of that information. So that's where I have some issues with this. I don't know, Mr. Chair, Mr. McSween, if there are any comments or concerns in regards to would this limit or prevent the federal government from moving forward without that provincial buy-in, so to speak, first? Because again, that could also add time delays as well as, again, that technical experience that might be in some places but not all.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. There are some challenges, and I think particularly to your point, there's a potentially unintended consequence here that it could result in the government giving up some federal jurisdiction to provinces and territories in areas that are federally regulated, which obviously, because of that confusion, that could very much cause delays in the implementation. I believe you mentioned this, but I think it would reduce or greatly limit the federal government's ability to determine the level of cybersecurity for federally regulated critical infrastructure. Just a couple of considerations, perhaps as well, too. In cases where a designated operator is also provincially regulated, the Act, as currently written, would only apply to those areas that are subject to the federal regulations. And as well, too, based on the amendment that was the government amendment provided earlier, there is a commitment within the Act to work collaboratively with provinces and territories, and the provisions exist within it already to ensure that information can be shared.
Any further discussion? Call for the vote on BQ 24. A show of hands, please, in favor. Against? Defeated. BQ 25. Ms. Michaud.
This is a similar amendment. It's actually not quite the same thing. I'm still going to move it. I'd like to see what my colleagues think about it. What's being added is that any law of a province relating to cybersecurity that provides for more stringent rules than those prescribed by regulations made under subsection 1 is to prevail in that province. In Quebec, for instance, where we have a cybersecurity department and a minister responsible for cybersecurity, one would think that the regulations are already quite relevant. It's an example where if the regulations in a given province are more stringent than the federal ones, then the more stringent ones would apply.
Ms. Michaud, Chair's ruling, I'm going to read. The purpose of Bill C-26 is to help protect critical cyber systems in order to support the continuity and security of vital services and vital systems. The amendment would allow any law of the province relating to cybersecurity that provides for more stringent rules than those prescribed by regulations to prevail in that province. As House of Commons Procedure and Practice 3rd edition states on page 770, an amendment to the bill that was referred to committee after second reading is out of order if it is beyond the scope and principle of the bill. In the opinion of the chair, and for the above-mentioned reason, giving precedence to a provincial law constitutes a new concept which goes beyond the scope of the bill as adopted by the House at second reading. Therefore, I declare the amendment inadmissible. Okay? Thank you, Ms. Michaud. G19. Right?
It's Mr. Motz.
Oh, Mr. What is it?
It's Mr. Motz. 50.1. So, because it's not.
Amendment. Reference 129-22438. 129-22438.
Excuse me, clause 13, after line 34 on page 80, we add the following. Subsection 2, in making regulations under subsection 1, the governor and council must seek to ensure consistency with existing regulatory regimes such as those established by provincial regulatory agencies and the North American Electric Reliability Corporation Critical Infrastructure Protection Standards. Yeah. So that's this particular amendment is to address two reoccurring concerns raised by witnesses during the study of this bill. One, that many provisions of this bill will be dealt with through regulations via the Governor and Council, and two, that new requirements and definitions should be harmonized with existing regulatory requirements. Manulife, Canadian Glass Association, Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Canadian Electricity Association all agree and share those concerns, and I agree with them.
O'Connell, please.
I have some concerns, but I'm going to first ask Mr. McSween or whomever is best that can address it. I guess my initial concerns, though, is this amendment just creates duplicates that goes against kind of the nature. But if I'm wrong, I'm happy to open this up for a little bit more discussion. I also think the word must might be a challenge, but I'll ask officials to maybe speak to this amendment first.
Sweeney,
Thank
please.
you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Thank you very much. We greatly appreciate the intention of this. It was certainly always intended that those considerations would be taken into the regulatory making process. However, the amendment could remove discretion from the government on what regulations are appropriate. The challenge is with the word must. It cannot be guaranteed that consistency will be ensured. Softening the language to may or consider consistency could work in that circumstance. Here we're asking ourselves, what if there are contradictory regimes? We want to make sure that we're putting in place the best regulations that make sense for Canada's critical infrastructure in consideration of other requirements as well. So the other aspect as well, too, the legislation itself was intended to be agnostic and not speak to very specific requirements. Those were intended to be built into the regulations, so an additional consideration for the committee there as well.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Mr. Motz.
Well, thank you. I appreciate those comments, but I think we heard during witness testimony that when it comes to cybersecurity, our sector operators, our organizations should be directing their time, their money, and their talent towards prevention, detection, and rapid remediation of cybersecurity incidents, rather than being bogged down really in potentially duplicate paperwork and jurisdictional overlap. And so, if it works that we can change the wording from must to should or may, then I think it's important that we still have this language there, and that gives you some comfort around the ability. Then I would propose someone make a sub-amendment to my motion. friends.
Sorry, I shouldn't have touched that. Also, wondering if Glenn would be willing to remove naming the agencies and just say existing regulatory regimes, because I think it's generally not a good idea to specifically spell them out. So if that's okay, I would move that we change must to may and end this amendment after the word regimes. Just to remove such as those established. So it would just end at regimes, so changing.
Yeah, I think after agencies, that would be work better.
Okay.
Yeah. Then I'm fine with it. So then it would, such as those established by provincial regulatory agencies, period, and we're done.
Mr. Julian, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but I'm not sure the operative word is may more than should. It isn't giving permission to work to ensure consistency. It's more providing direction and saying that this is what the goal that we are looking for. But it doesn't prescribe it. Must, I agree, is far too rigid a word, but I would suggest should instead of may, just because I think that's the intent of the amendment as well.
If we're in a debate about should or may, I don't know. I was going to suggest maybe consider consistency to make sure that it is being considered, but if the debate is really now at should or may or consider, I would, before we get to that, I would just ask for clarity, Mr. McSween, if we ended the amendment after existing regulatory regimes, or is that ideal, or should we include this such as those established by provincial regulatory agencies? Because if we do leave in the such as those established by provincial regulatory agencies, that's pretty specific to provincial regulated industries rather than existing regulatory regimes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I don't see any concern with ending it at provincial regulatory agencies. And the caveat, of course, to that comment is that the must is taken out.
You're agnostic to the regulatory regimes, whether they're provincial or whatnot, but it's the debate around may, should, must, I guess, at this point. Shall is the same as must.
Okay, so just for clarity, it was Ms. Damoff used the word may. So is that, we're sticking with that? And, okay. Officials, May is okay. It'll soon be May.
Not soon enough.
Yeah.
So the sub-amendment.
Okay. So we'll call a vote on the sub-amendment. Do you want to, all those in?
The sub-amendment being may.
May and deleted after.
Do you want us to, Mr. Julian, we'll read it. Let's be clear. We'll read exactly what it's supposed to say before we do any further.
In
Do
making regulation, under subsection 1, the governing council may seek to ensure consistency with existing regulatory regimes, such as those established by provincial regulatory agencies. And that's it.
Yeah, I suggest, Mr. Chair, that we have 2 votes on this. I support the second half. I don't support may. I believe it should read should. So I'm torn because I'm supporting one half of the amendment, the sub-amendment, and not supporting the other.
We can't have 2 sub-amendments. By UC, we could do it. But technically, we should vote on the sub-amendment.
So the full sub-amendment.
Yes, unless we get UC to split the.
So the first thing I can do, I guess, I'm told, is ask if it's UC to separate them out. And if it's not UC, then we'll vote on the whole amendment, this sub-amendment. Yeah, okay? So we didn't get UC, Mr. Julian, so we will call for a vote on what we just read out on the sub-amendment. Would you like a recorded vote? No. Show of hands, those in favor? Those against? En favor. Good. Okay. Now,
No, G19. Oh, wait, as amended, so CPC 50.1.
yes, we get it, yes. So CPC 50.1 as amended? Carried? Yes. Thank you. G19.
Quickly, Chair, is just to address a discrepancy between the French and English version of the legislation.
Thank you. No further discussion. Shall G19 carry?
Yes.
Carried. G20. Ms. O'Connell.
Oh, thank you, Chair. This is, again, just to provide that amendment that we dealt with in G10 and G12 to ensure the availability of the due diligence defense for designated operators.
Further discussion. Shall G20 carry?
Yes.
NDP 37. I have a chair's ruling.
He needs to move it first.
Oh, sorry, Mr. I'm rushing. Mr. Julian.
Well, we're actually coming to a close, Mr. Chair, so you've been very efficient, so has the committee. I move NDP 37, that is the same as NDP 9. This would establish a special advocate for issues, for example, security orders subject to judicial review. And Mr. Chair, I did write to the minister a number of weeks ago. I'm disappointed to have not received a reply calling on the minister to ensure a royal recommendation for this particular amendment. I am sure he sent you a letter saying he agreed with the royal recommendation, but if he hasn't, you would be compelled to rule this out of order, which would be a shame.
Thank you, Mr. Julian. The amendment attempts to give the power for a judge to appoint a person from a list established by the minister to act as a special advocate in the proceeding, creating a new and distinct spending to be drawn from the Treasury. As House of Commons Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition states on page 772, since the amendment may not infringe upon the financial initiative of the Crown, it is inadmissible if it imposes a charge of the public treasury, or if it extends the objects or purposes or relaxes the conditions and qualifications specified in the royal recommendation. In the opinion of the chair, and for the above-mentioned reason, the amendment proposes to appoint a special advocate, which imposes a charge in the public treasury. Therefore, I rule the amendment inadmissible.
So, yeah, so it cannot be moved because it's...
Right. E38.
Is he moving it first?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This endeavors to do what we've already done in accepting NDP 7. So I'm presuming that there may be, because what this does is amend line 13 on page 84 with the same reporting requirements. We, earlier in this meeting, made some changes to NDP 7 as adopted. So I would move NDP 38 with the hope that those would be forthcoming as sub-amendments that would then be consistent with what we adopted earlier at the beginning of the legislation, this allowing for that consistency by putting in place the same type of amendment and reporting mechanism in the latter part of the bill.
Mr. Julian, BQ 26 and CPC 52 cannot be moved as they are identical, right? If that was moved?
No.
Okay. yeah, he moved it. Ms. O'Connell, please.
Thanks, Chair. So again, we recognize we've accepted changes throughout the course of this. I guess it's a little bit awkward in the sense that we prefer G20.1 in addressing this issue. But because we're dealing with NDP 38 first, that if there's support for NDP 38, we would have some amendments to be consistent, or we would just support G20. But maybe I'll put the amendments, the sub-amendments on the floor, and then we can determine. But for the sake of discussion, but in section E and F, similar to what we had done earlier, I would move to replace the number, quote the number, in E and F with prescription of compliance. And just while this is just, again, going back to our earlier conversation that just having the number could be problematic, but we would rather, yes, yes. That it was for replace the quote the number in subparagraph E and F with prescription of compliance. I have prescription, but description I think is fine. It's the same.
Do we need a copy of that? So this is a sub-amendment, and I'm going to get Ms. O'Connell just to read it so everybody's clear on what we're doing.
Thank
Please.
you, Chair. In NGP 38, I would sub-amend to replace, quote, the words, the number in subparagraph E and F, and replace it with, quote, prescription of compliance in both of those.
Any further discussion? Okay. Shall we vote on the sub-amendment?
Yes.
All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those against, I guess there's none. Carried. Okay, now back to the main amendment, motion.
NDP 38 as amended.
Yeah, shall NDP 38 carry as amended? Okay, carried. BQ 26. Oh, sorry. G20? G20.
G20.1.
G20.1.
Thank you, Chair. This is again creating a non-exhaustive list of contents that need to be included in the minister's annual report. We had different discussions about this, but I think, again, it's just to provide clarity so that we didn't need to get into a report on number of events, a report on this or that. This will provide some clarity on what should be covered in the annual report.
Thank you. Shall G 20.1 carry? Yes. Carried. Shall Clause 13 carry? Yes. As amended? Yes. On division? Shall Clause 14 carry? Yes. As amended, I should say. No, we didn't amend it. Sorry. Shall...
Point of order?
Certainly, Mr. Julian.
If there is will around this table, Mr. Chair, you could actually group all of the clauses that have not been amended and see if they're agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Julian. From 15, clause 15 to 19. Shall they carry? On division, carried. And shall the schedule carry? Shall the title carry? Yes. Shall the bill as amended carry? Yes. Shall the chair report the bill to the House as amended? Yes. Shall the committee order a reprint of the bill as amended for the use of the House at report stage? Adjourned?
Mr. Chair, if I may have a special point of order. But it's a good thing. I have three things to say. First off, I did circulate as a notice of motion that forest wildland firefighters should be included under the firefighter category in the National Occupational Classification, NOC, and that this be reported to the House. There hasn't been sufficient notice. Of course, if there was a groundswell of support, we could have you see and adopt this motion. If not, I certainly leave it as something, hopefully, that could be adopted at the next meeting of Public Safety. And so I'm hoping that this is something that would have all-party consensus and support. Secondly, this is my last meeting for Public Safety. And I wanted to thank all members of the committee, you, Mr. Chair, and of course all members of the committee. This is a very smart and very effective committee. Been very impressed with every single member on it, and enjoy the spirit that everybody brings to this table. Sometimes we have disagreements, but we work through it, and I find that extremely important. Et je voulais aussi dire un gros merci.
I'd also like to thank all the staff, the clerk, the analysts, the translators and interpreters, all those who are in those positions. It's thanks to them that the committee works so well.
The person who takes a lead on our team, Doris Ma, who's been a big part of our work over the last 14 months. I've been here for 14 months. And so I've really enjoyed it. I will be coming back for special guest spots and look forward to the same welcome that Alistair McGregor got when he came back for guest spots. But Alistair will be joining this committee as of Thursday. So merci beaucoup. Et, merci.
Thank you very much. And thank you for all the work that we accomplished together.
Getting to know you a little better as chair, so I appreciate everything that you brought to the table, and I'm sure everyone else around here does as well. But back to you want unanimous consent on your...
Can I just take clarity? Chair, if I may, please?
Certainly.
So if I understood Mr. Julian correctly, he's saying that if we don't get unanimous consent, he's coming back Thursday to move this?
I wasn't threatening to come back. I was.
That affects my decision.
I was suggesting if all members felt comfortable and there was a groundswell, I would be more than pleased if there was unanimous consent. If folks want to check back with their respective teams, that's quite all right. This is then a notice of motion for the next meeting, and Alistair McGregor would be moving it on my behalf. But I understand that a number of people around the table, including Mr. Lloyd, Madame Michaud, are already very supportive of this. And so this would be something that hopefully we would have a consensus on, if not today, in the coming days.
Thank you, Mr. Julian. Unanimous consent? Okay. Ms. O'Connell, please.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Mr. Julian, for your service on this committee. It has been nice to work with you, although my time was short with you. In terms of the motion itself, I just don't know enough and have enough background on it, so I'm not sure if the committee had dealt with it previously before I was here. Okay, but I would ask if I could just go back and have a little bit of a briefing on it. It's not to say we're necessarily opposed, I just don't know enough, and I would appreciate a more fulsome conversation if that's okay.
It's fair enough. Okay. Ms. Damoff.
I just want the record to show that thanks to the NDP, that this committee has done exceptional work.
These officials are going to want to come back every week, you guys.
Next time wear blue.
Okay. So moved.
Delegation arrived.